The Mass Effect franchise is practically defined by its unforgettable and legendary characters. Greats like Garrus, Tali, Mordin, Rex, and Commander Shepard himself are all immensely deep and interesting people to dive into and get to know, all with their own sets of political beliefs, ideas, and wants and goals. But for me, I've actually always liked one thing about Mass Effect more than any of the characters, and that's the world building. It's the whole reason I like the first game in the series so much more than, say, the second installment, my least favorite in the trilogy, and while that's an unpopular opinion to have, I'll defend it to the grave. And under this context, there's actually one specific character in the series that rises above everyone else. One that most people might not think of immediately, but one that for me quite literally defines what it is that made me fall in love with this series in the first place. A villain that played host to the greatest moment in the entire multi-game spanning story, and a presence so omnipotent, so powerful, and so unknown that few things in fiction can even match it. For those of you that don't know, Sovereign is one of the main two bad guys in the original Mass Effect game, and in many ways is the catalyst for all of the events that happen afterwards. But the Mass Effect series didn't gain true mass market reach and appeal until the second game, so tons of people never actually even met Sovereign in this first installment, and only know some of what makes him great from mentions in games afterwards. The thing that makes Sovereign so compelling as a character, though, is that unlike most villains, he truly feels unbeatable, and that's due to such patience and setup from the narrative. You see, you learn early on in Mass Effect 1 that the galaxy is at a threat from an all-powerful and ancient race of machine intelligences known as the Reapers. In fact, even at the start of the game, you see Sovereign taking off from a planet you are on, assuming it's an enormous enemy ship, when actually it's the enemy itself. And as you piece together more and more of the narrative while playing through the game, you start to get hints at what you're up against, with visions of past races that have been killed by the Reapers in cycles millions of years before yours. And it's all of that buildup and mystique behind Sovereign and the Reapers before even meeting them that makes them so foreboding and formidable, along with really interesting. I'll never forget the first time I ever played Mass Effect being absolutely consumed by the Reapers and the idea of their doom and Armageddon. And despite how great the characters around me were, what I really wanted to know more about was the driving force of the main narrative, the big bad guys. And this desire to know more is finally answered near the end of the game during the mission on Virmire, where you first come into contact with the Reaper ship you saw at the start of the game, and the enemy that's been behind the scenes pulling the strings the entire way through finally reveals himself. And it's here you're met with quite literally the greatest single moment for a villain in game's history, in my opinion, where this ancient and all-knowing being of sorts speaks to you over hologram, filling the room you're in with a menacing red hue. And no matter what question you ask, no matter how much you prod, Sovereign always feels one step ahead of you and treats you not as his equal, but as nothing more than an ant being crushed by a shoe. Seriously, listen to some of this conversation here and tell me it's not awesome.
Your lives are measured in years and decades. You wither and die. We are eternal, the pinnacle of evolution and existence. Before us, you are nothing. Your extinction is inevitable. We are the end of everything.
And I can't express just how amazing and unexpected this reveal the first time playing Mass Effect is. So much so that it will send the stakes of the story to an entirely new level, and in my case, even gave me goosebumps as a kid. Going up against a character that is not only cunning and strong, but beyond our human comprehension. A Cthulhian-like entity that has goals and ambitions that reach beyond the pale that we can even understand. And following this moment, you then soon have to fly back to the Citadel, a massive space station at the center of all galactic commerce and life, and save it from literally one ship, one being, Sovereign, from destroying literally the entire galaxy on his own by activating a secret function in the station. It's such a powerful moment and reveal for a character that up to that point basically didn't play a role, and it's the exact things like this that makes me love Mass Effect so much, and the first game especially. Literally one Reaper, one character on his own, almost wipes out the entire galaxy you know and love. And even after killing him, discovering that there are thousands more Reapers just like him flying towards you from deep space makes it so terrifying and the perfect ending. Really though, for me, what made Sovereign such an utterly captivating and compelling villain and character was that he truly embodied the perfect idea of an unbeatable foe. A presence and intelligence so above our own that even trying to understand it would require millions of years of evolution. And while the Reaper's motives and history is further fleshed out later in the series, especially in Mass Effect 3's DLCs, this character here in the first game really exemplifies what made the series so great in the first place before the Reapers just became another enemy that we fight like in every other game. A universe out there to discover, but also one that we can't ever fully understand, making us ask more questions than we'll ever get answers to. And sometimes that's what the best characters out there do. They make you appreciate the universe and world building even more, resulting in you falling in love with everything else a game has to offer too. And for me, no villain did that better than specifically Sovereign, a literal god machine that embodies the fear of the unknown itself. And at the end of the day, what's more compelling than that? Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that is absolutely filled to the brim with compelling and thought-provoking characters. Whether it be on side quests, main story missions, or small gigs, it's almost impossible to explore this world for any longer than an hour without stumbling upon some of the best and well-written NPCs of all time. So choosing just one for a video like this can be really difficult. And while originally I was deciding between Johnny Silverhand, who has such an amazing arc as a person and is someone who is constantly with us throughout the entire game, or Panam, Rogue, and Takamura for their steadfast outlooks on life that really make you think, the real most compelling character from this entire game is, in my opinion, Judy Alvarez. Because you see, Judy is a tragic character in every way imaginable. She has suffered her entire life through loss of friends and family, and in some ways has even been swept up into the downtrodden life of gangs and underground beady film surfing. And so when you first meet her, she's quite standoffish, reserved, and quick to have you leave. She doesn't trust anyone around her, that is, except for the only person she has left in her entire life, Evelyn Parker. However, as you progress through the trials of the main quest of the game, you eventually are taken down a path that includes Evelyn being kidnapped from the dollhouse she works in and being forcibly tortured in a secret underground dungeon. And so Judy reaches out to you looking for help as she knew you worked with Evelyn, and after hours of fighting and searching, when you finally stumble upon her in that forsaken room underground, completely devoid of thoughts and emotion, with blood streaming down her face and a camera ominously facing a torn apart bed in a sketchy room, it hits you how bad Judy must feel. She cries and screams out to Evelyn, only to look into her now soulless and devoured eyes that say more than any words ever could. So you help Judy bring Evelyn back to her apartment, where she thanks you for all that you've done and says that she'll help Evelyn get back on her feet while wishing you the best. But as if it couldn't get any worse, you soon receive a call from Judy, struggling to compose the very words she speaks, begging for you to rush over. And it's here you discover Evelyn dead in the bathtub, after taking her own life, with Judy beside her crying uncontrollably and struggling to stand amidst the weakness her own soul has suffered. A girl who has had nothing but pain throughout her life and lost everything she held dear, now lost all that she had left. And looking into her eyes and seeing that pain tells so much more of a story than almost any character out there could even attempt to. About someone who feels they let down the last person who loved them in a world that has forsaken them. The real triumph, though, comes from what happens later, as Judy composes herself, stays strong, lighting a cigarette on the balcony and looking for revenge. And whether or not you decide to turn Judy against that path or help her on it, you eventually will fully earn her trust and be asked to come to see her childhood home, which is now buried underwater. And it's here she talks about how she grew up as a child, the pain she's been through, and most importantly, how despite it all, she still carries on with hope. No matter what life throws at this woman, no matter what this damn city decides to make her suffer through next, there is a fire in her soul that lights one within V and yours alike as the player as well. Because you see, Judy doesn't come across as bombastic as Johnny, as ride or die as Panam, or as strong in conviction as Takamura. But what Judy does have is something that in a way is so much more impressive. An absolute resilience in the face of adversity to stand strong and remain hopeful no matter what, not just in her future, but in helping others around her that she cares about. And it's why seeing her at the end of the game take those steps to leave Night City and find a new home for herself is so powerful. It's a reflection of a character we don't often see in games, movies, or any form of entertainment for that matter. Usually the best characters are masculine and strong men or women, or feminine men that finally found their soft side and can open up. But it's seldom we see such strong female characters that also never had to shed their sense of femininity to get there. It's why I found Judy so much more interesting and gravitated towards her more than Panam on my first playthrough. She is a broken girl, someone who has been administered to the worst in life at every turn, and yet despite all of that, she refuses to give up, but even more compelling, refuses to stop believing and trusting in others too. She's a character that shows through the hardship. Becoming more hard yourself isn't always the answer. Sometimes through your love and willingness to rely on others and believe in them, you can keep that lovable essence inside too and still be strong. The type of character that defines what it means to be strong in the first place. And also one of the most compelling of all time. A woman that no matter the circumstance stands as a beacon of hope in a world that has none. Showing just how deep and emotional a journey with another human can get through all the highs and lows that you experience with her. One of the most fascinating and reflective video game characters out there. The Witcher series, just like its counterpart at CD Projekt Red, Cyberpunk, is home to countless unforgettable characters. Yennefer, Triss, Vesemir, and of course, our main protagonist and also the thing most people think of when they hear the word Witcher, Geralt. But amongst this hodgepodge of so many standouts, there is one that rises above them all, for me at least. A character defined by his evil and cunning nature, but also the riddles and insanity he thrusts into a world already filled with so many. Gaunter dimm. We actually meet Gaunter right at the start of the main game, in an inn where he gives us information on our quest and mentions that we may meet again. But at this point, he seems like a nice yet strange older man that is just willing to help out. It's only during the Hearts of Stone DLC that we actually get to dive into this insane man's nature even further. At the start of the DLC, Geralt finds himself trapped in a jail cell aboard a boat, and out of nowhere, Gaunter appears and tells Geralt he can help if he agrees to a pact, after which he brands Geralt's face and causes a massive storm that unleashes Geralt from his holding. So it's not clear who this strange figure is quite yet, but after this escapade, it's clear that he has powers well beyond what we originally thought, and Geralt even remarks to him the next time he sees him that he must be a mage with his control over the elements. But as time passes, we discover that Gaunter is a lot more than just your run-of-the-mill mage. Out on your quests throughout the DLC, for those of us with especially astute detective skills, Gaunter can actually be seen all around us the entire time, hiding as guards, peasants, or nearby patrons. He is watching our every move and idea, and always seems to be one step ahead. But when he talks to us, he assures us that he cannot lie, and while this is technically true, it's through his master manipulation of wordplay and diction that he construes his thoughts in ways that are more tricky than straightforward. A man that speaks in nothing but riddles, yet stands by his convictions, meaning he does in theory always tell the truth. However, up to this point in the DLC, Gaunter is still nothing more than a strange character with witty and charismatic banter, as well as powers multiple mages in the canon already have. Where things start to get really insane, and our first true glimpse at the powers of this man is when Geralt meets him in an inn. Gaunter wants to speak to Geralt privately, but instead of commissioning a room at the inn to do so, he simply claps his hands, and suddenly, in the blink of an eye, the world before Geralt and Gaunter freezes in place. It's seems that this strange and puzzling man has a lot more intrigue than he originally has let on, and it's here Geralt realizes he's up against something so much greater. But as to what that something is, Gaunter keeps it close to his chest, instead deciding to stick a spoon through a man's eyes and unfreeze time, where his face explodes into a bloody mess around him and Gaunter makes a quick exit. So as the DLC progresses, there are more and more run-ins with this mysterious figure, and with each thing we peel back more about him, he becomes more and more interesting. He obviously is evil in nature to some extent, but he also seems nice and charismatic at other points when talking to him. But behind it all is a sense that you can't shake that this man is hiding something much, much more evil than he's been revealed to be yet. More terrifying than Geralt has ever gone up against. And Geralt's gone against a lot of scary things. And the way that Gaunter is written really sells his point so much. It makes the DLC and story on offer here so intriguing, and it's the single reason for most people this DLC is so beloved in the first place, and also why Gaunter is by many accounts the best villain the series has ever seen. We even get information on him as well by visiting an Oxenfurt professor studying the dark arts named Shakeslot, who explains that after trying to study the man more, he was blinded and now forced to sit in a ritualistic circle for all of his life or lose a pact with Gaunter and perish. Shakeslot tells Geralt that Gaunter is quite literally evil incarnate, and that nothing he has ever seen in his line of work even comes close to the small glimpses he had of the wicked nature of this mysterious figure. And lo and behold, mid-conversation, Shakeslot accidentally steps outside the circle, after which a bookshelf falls that Geralt is able to stop, but this forces Shakeslot to move back and trip, falling over and killing himself with a hit to the head. Gaunter, as usual, never lies, but hid the fact that Geralt would be part of this death as well. And really, it's just another example of why Gaunter is so compelling as a character. He is pure evil in a way, but also incredibly smart, always one step ahead of everyone. But still, the question as to who Gaunter truly is, or what he is, still looms. And only at the end of the DLC story do we finally get a glimpse into his true nature. Depending on your actions here, he can send Geralt to a land of shadow beings and strange visions where he must solve a riddle, or even transform into a demon-like figure that speaks in tongues and causes the world around you to turn unrelentingly black. And just like that, he disappears, but with a promise Geralt hasn't seen the last of him. Even after all the talking, all the intrigue, you still end not knowing who he is. And that's maybe the most interesting part about Gaunter. Not only his amazing writing, sadistic depth with a happy front, or fun riddles, but the fact that he still hides something so menacing that we've yet to figure out. Many in the community assume that he is in fact the devil, as it would explain his riddles and evil nature. But maybe his initials point to something even crazier. Gaunter o Dimm. G-O-D. God. Just when you thought this character couldn't get any more fascinating, his legend and intrigue only builds. For some reason, religion seems to be a topic that most games and their characters seldom dive into in any sort of meaningful manner. It's almost like developers are scared to talk about it, or when they do, it seems so hollow and uninteresting. But there is one character that, against the odds, gives us an impression of faith and belief that might just have you wondering too. And that character is Joshua Graham from the Fallout New Vegas DLC, Honest Hearts. You originally get to the start of this questline by traveling to Zion Canyon National Park in Utah, where you are met with a band of warring tribes and feral outlaws alike. You have the White-Leg Savages, who are killing in service to Caesar's Legion, one of the main factions from the base game who harbor slaves and all serve a dogmatic dictator named Caesar, battling against the Sorrows and the Dead Horse tribe members, who specifically are led by a man named Joshua Graham. When you first meet Joshua though, he is checking dozens of guns on a table, and he asks that you help him out against the White-Leg people, a seemingly very personal mission of his own. But while talking with Graham, you also notice many other things as well. For one, his entire body is covered in bandages. He suffers in pain every moment of his life, and due to strict religious beliefs and doctrines, refuses to take medical chems to shroud the pain beneath him. And later on down the questline, if you inquire more about this, he explains that he once worked under Caesar and committed committed heinous acts of violence and destruction, all in the name of a cause worth nothing. When younger, he left his religious sect of New Canaanites in the world and stumbled upon Caesar before he was even known by that name, and was swept up by his charismatic leadership. But because of mistakes he made, he was betrayed. Caesar kills Joshua's family in front of him and sets him on fire, throwing him down a massive canyon and breaking his bones. However, in these final moments for Joshua, he had only one thing to rely on to save him: the love of God and of his people. So by some strange miracle or happenstance of faith, Joshua manages to rise from his broken and flame-ridden body, surviving and finding faith again as a new Canaanite, an analogy to the Mormons in our real life, and returns back to his original people, after which he takes an oath to his God that he will serve in his name forever and never become lost again. He forgave those who wronged him, and in turn was forgiven for his own sins, given another chance at life, living by the creed of his people, that by giving into the word of God and his laws, they can be given eternal salvation in the end. Despite this horrifying story though, by the time you meet him, Joshua still seems to be driven, at least in part, by that rage and need for revenge like before. In fact, at the very end of the DLC, Joshua even asks that you stand by his side as you slaughter countless members of the White Leg tribe, leading the Dead Horse and Sorrow's people in an all-out assault on the tribe with thoughtless killing in your and Joshua's wake. And after fighting your way into the heart of this enemy territory, you were met by their fearsome leader, Salt Upon Wounds, who now cowers in the face of Joshua on his knees, just like Joshua did so many years ago. But Joshua in his hate-fueled rage wants nothing more than revenge, and it's only if you have a high enough speech skill that you can talk him out of it and lead yourself down the path of the best ending to the DLC, where Joshua comes to his senses and realizes that he is wrong, that only by putting his faith in a God he believes in so deeply will the White Leg peoples and their leaders truly be met with what they deserve. So he looks at Salt in the Wound in the eyes and lets him go, all while the canyon returns to some semblance of normalcy, with at least a partial version of the sorrows and other innocence still intact. Only by remaining strong in his faith, in his absolute devotion to God, even in the face of people who support the killers of his own family and body alike, can Joshua find true salvation. And it's this story and Joshua's character that show so perfectly the deepest struggles of faith, of believing in a God when it feels like he has at points abandoned you, or turning the other cheek when your most hated enemy gets to walk and see another day after slaughtering so many of those you love. Because you see, faith isn't an easy thing, but as Joshua shows, it's something that can lead to a life of even greater purpose, and also more love and happiness in a world even when it's devoid of it almost entirely. And as someone that's not even religious myself, what a powerful message that is. But I'll let Joshua have the final words, with his best quote from the entire DLC, and one that speaks volumes more than the rapid nature in which it's spoken could ever express. I have been baptized twice, once in water, once in flame. I will carry the fire of the Holy Spirit inside until I stand before my Lord in judgment.